see. So as soon as it stops raining, you'll leave.
I hope that the rain will never stop.
What?
If it continues, I'll be able to stay here forever. That wasn't meant to be a joke.
Welcome everyone. I'll just say it until they turn my mic on. Welcome everyone. My name is Eleanor Jackson and I introduced myself yesterday, but I know that there are a few new faces in the audience. I am a poet and chair of Peril magazine, which looks at Asian Australian arts and culture, and I'm very lucky to be here with you today as your MC. On behalf of us all, I would like to welcome you again to the Fair Play Symposium for Day 2. Those of you lucky enough to be here yesterday will know that it was a wide-ranging, challenging, energising, and I hope thought-provoking conversation that spanned colonialism, access, cultural diversity, dreaming the culture forward, and some beautiful music beside. Today we have another action-packed program, and it is my honour to begin it by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet, the Kulin Nation. I know that we collectively pay our respects to their elders past and present, and we recognise the many emerging leaders who have joined us here today. I'd also like to make a warm greeting and a welcome to our Pacific colleagues from the Intersect program and from those who have joined from the UK as well. It's an interesting collaborative mix of cultural backgrounds, and I think that to add 2 more sectors and 2 more communities is a really welcome addition. I have a few small housekeeping matters, particularly for those who are new. You may find that there is a name tag for you and a pronoun sticker should you wish to avail of one. There are QR codes around the venue which will enable you to scan the image and then access the live captioning. If you wish to watch the live captioning, there is one screen operating here at the centre of the venue, but also the Facebook live feed on the Diversity Arts Facebook page has live captioning, which you may like to watch in the quiet rooms. So there are rooms on the 3rd and 4th floor available for folks who, for any reason, whether you wish to breastfeed, whether you need a private space for prayer time, if you would like to watch the feed in a different environment, then we would really like to encourage you to meet one of our friendly ushers in the W t-shirts and to ask them about the additional rooms. We've been really grateful for the feedback for those who used the rooms yesterday, and also tried to listen to a little bit of feedback that we have had over the course of the proceedings yesterday about how we can better meet people's needs. I have also been asked to remind people that it's helpful if you keep your mobile phones to silent, just to avoid additional background noise while the speakers and presentations are going on. I am also very lucky, after all of that housekeeping, to begin by introducing Neil Morris. I am delighted when poets get to take centre stage, and Neil is a Yorta Yorta poet, independent musician, broadcaster and a community activist. He has worked in a range of Indigenous affairs roles across a number of sectors, from cultural revitalisation and traditional custodian affairs more broadly. He has a really strong decolonial lens, which is a concept and a question that we have really been interrogating here collectively. And I know that we will have a short opportunity afterwards to discuss some of those issues. I hope I'm pronouncing Dreaming Now, even though it absences many vowels, correctly, which is Neil's current music project. And there's a single coming out, I think early last year it came out, Australia Does Not Exist, which I also think would be a concept so many of us here would like to keep challenging and questioning. If you need to catch him more regularly, he hosts on Triple R Still Here, and it's well worth the tune in. Ladies and gentlemen, if you could please welcome Neil to the stage.
Nangana mulana kulan yambana waka gata nili otiota yir. Good morning. I pay my respects to the beautiful Kulin Nation's land, which it is that we are on, the ancestors of their people, the continued connection to their country, that no matter what is ever placed upon their lands is the most important thing upon this land. I'm going to do a couple of tracks for you and have a quick chat with Eleanor, which I look forward to. Thank you. If we stand upon a land of a nation, wisdom, creator, spirit, beautiful, strong, yes, it giveth life for these sacred lands, eternal systems delivered through the sun. To the depths it glisten, stars in the night, crystallized life, ancestors' prayers in my ears so sublime. Blood in the soil, never forget or deny the anguish, the cries, the ongoing genocide, the devastation, theft and wiping out of tribes, remorseless attacks, heinous crimes, poison in the waters, yet the people we survived, inscribed with lies and decimated with deceitful bribes. Yeah, the people we survive, pay respect and give love and thanks one time. One time. One time. Peace, love, and unity to all my originals rock. Our ancestors in our lands amidst every child, woman, and man, no matter where we stand. Our ancestors in our land, so I pay respect. Our ancestors in these lands amidst every child, woman, and man, no matter where we stand. Our ancestors in these lands, so I pay respect. But yet the world lost its mind like it's sleep deprived. People not peeping signs of the symbols divine. Carvings in stone, sacred powers, ancient truths in the workings of the grinds, in the creeks, in the rivers, forests where snakes sliver, bird calls deliver old truths that lost fiction. The fog's holy halo, crystallize and glisten, now replaced with street names newly written. Smiles line space, comfortable and smitten, roads and avenues, central business district, spiritual lassitude, laws of metaphysics overtaken by the laws of these long lost mystics who preceded the present new type of linguistics, causing nations conflated, seemingly cryptic but confusion running rampant, but deeply intrinsic devastation dipped in, severed to the ancient rocks, vaporized out of sight, and soon to be broken down plot, omens I can hear seeping into sight. Time to awaken, pay respect. Our ancestors in these lands amidst every child, woman, and man, no matter where we stand. Our ancestors in these lands, so I pay respect. Our ancestors in these lands amidst every child, woman, and man, no matter where we stand. Our ancestors in these lands, so I pay respect. So that is an acknowledgement of country in hip-hop format. The next track I'm going to do for you is the track that Eleanor spoke about earlier, which is a track that I released just prior to Invasion Day last year, called Australia Does Not Exist. It is about Indigenous nations existing. Australia Does Not Exist is the track. Unfortunately, we don't have beautiful vocals on the hook today, and I didn't bring the instrumental with them, so I'm just gonna wrap it. 1788, yeah, they came upon these lands, washed into the bay, stepped upon sacred sand, didn't recognize there was governance at hand, laws and conditions not based upon demands, tribes, clans, and families align with sacred chants, song lines, stories, blessing woman, child, and man, stars, constellations, formulating plans, bountiful plains of medicinal plants, spouts beyond the physical, reading our dance, none of this dreaming unfolds by chance, but they didn't see this majesty right before their eyes, labeled us as savages and plotted our demise, took out star formations to represent their plot, not realizing our true essence brought it through those knots, busy painting laws to sidestep our rights, deny our very ways, to be brought out of sight, out of mind. About that those this landscape never defined in the previous 60,000 plus years of time. That said, Australia still a scene of crime where they push aside the matters and it's blinded in the blind. Cause Australia does not exist. What they be selling is myth. Yo, Australia does not exist, but they keep on trying to tell it. Yo, Australia does not exist. Yeah, Australia does not exist. See, none of this is what they try make it seem. See, laws formed in power dynamics and schemes, superimposed upon eons of dreams, besieged with the intent to make us bleed. Adopt their creeds to wither in the back, drop and recede. Assimilation policy, a swollen horror scene. Right, Australia, false democracy, no jurisdiction to take over autonomy. The lobotomy reads live. A surgical pose to eradicate all black lives. They took children as they took all under the sky. Put poison in the waters, yeah, these heinous crimes, but we survived. Yeah, we still on these lands and we thrive. Yes, we strong as ever, fam, yet the dreaming right here in the now. No matter the shackles, they cannot put their lights up. We get ignited and proud, cause Australia does not exist. Yeah, Australia does not exist. Yeah, Australia, it does not exist. Australia does not exist. It's the power I'll be jamming out on a guitar or synth. Unfortunately, I don't have that today. Just gonna keep walking up and down. Open your eyes to the dreams, none of this is what they try to make it seem. Australia does not exist. Open your eyes to the dreams, none of this is what they try to make it seem. Australia does not exist. Just a charade painting pictures to try paint a new picture to evade the true identity of this land. Built on legislations of false formations without true jurisdiction, propagated through mass manipulations of populations and resources. Genocidal policies and forces, born in the blood of our ancestors' massacres, but still sacred spirit here. Breathe in the air, true essence delivered from our mother's womb and hands. This always was and always will be a land of countless indigenous nations, none of which are called Australia.
Ourselves. Oh, Neil, I feel so much better already. I'm so grateful. Oh, it's a strange thing. I feel like for those of you who were here yesterday, I'm sure I had a similar reaction where all of those kind of higher cognitive functions go into overdrive and you're thinking about words and you're entirely separated from the body. And I went home and I had a little dance off with my baby girl and it was so good. And that last piece especially, it's almost like a PhD I have actually read, which was quite long, but very good, around the Australian imaginary and land literature and law. But essentially, that is the power of what art can give you, because otherwise it's 50,000 words or it's 3 minutes and I feel good and reconnected back in my body. Tell me a bit more about your practice and about what drives it. We talked in the green room about how important representation is for you. What does it mean in your practice?
Representation of Indigenous people in this beautiful land that we are upon is the highest thing that we could be doing right now to make this place better, as far as my perspective is. And obviously the arts is visibly one of the most powerful ways that we can do that. But it's not only that, it's one of the most powerful forms of our cultural practice, and to continue to do that unimpeded by whatever colonial structures are upon these lands, I guess, is something that drives my work and drives my vision to be able to do that as much as possible. So I guess the medium of hip hop is, it's symptomatic of the times. I guess the ability for it to have power maybe if we didn't have this colonial construct upon our land, something like hip hop wouldn't be as necessary or wouldn't gain as much attention. So I guess myself going towards hip hop partly was a drive to be, or to feel, to want to be a little bit clearer about expression. So hip hop isn't necessarily a thing I've done for very long or necessarily had a strong envision to want to do it, but I've always believed in the power of it as an art form, and it just so happened that being able to explain things quite clearly and use a lot of words in a short space of time to present a range of different themes, there is that ability to do that. So in terms of doing hip hop and the reasons behind it, that's a couple of the real core reasons, most definitely. But I think the themes in particularly that second track should speak quite clearly for itself.
I think it came through. I'm not sure if it's on Scott Morrison's top playlist, but who knows what he listens to while he's timing his shower. I am really, I'm just looking at the time. I was like, I could go down the rabbit hole on hip hop because I think it's a really interesting vernacular and a really interesting opportunity to shape a kind of cultural vernacular using essentially an American form, but a form that has a whole other range of lineages and challenges and gender dynamics, all kinds of things. But how do you see that question of representation working across the music sector more broadly? Is it something that hip hop has an affinity for because of its kind of political roots and its, I suppose, verbal and textual focus? Or is it something that the music industry is really opening its eyes to and challenging?
I think it's a variety of those things. I guess the quality, first and foremost, of a lot of the work that's being created by hip-hop artists, particularly of colour, it does speak for itself, and the power behind that work, the truth behind that work, the things that it represents, they're all quite legitimate and have a relevance that, again, coming back to genres of music, how do you quantify one being more powerful over another or one being able to convey a message more powerfully than another? Obviously dependent upon the listener. But the fact of the need for truth-telling, particularly in this nation at the moment, which is prevalent across all forms of living in this land at the moment, I guess that does make it a good time for hip-hop. Whether or not people who actually engage with it value it in the deepest extent is another question in of itself. It could be the edginess of it as a genre that attracts a lot of people to want to consume it. And, you know, as someone who's involved in the music industry, seeing the popularity of hip-hop that's coming out of this country at the moment, being given a platform, it's super fascinating to look at that and actually ask the questions, is it fully valued or is it about currency? And I think the big question mark for me is around, is there just a currency to it at the moment? Certainly a lot of people are promoting it because they believe in the message and that it can convey a message that's really powerful, but by the same token, people aren't booking an artist like myself to do the biggest shows. There's still a careful curation to make sure that the content only speaks about certain matters in certain places. So if we can call that tokenism or selective exploitation of people of colour, I guess, you know, those kind of topics can come into the conversation as well and are definitely present.
Look, I don't think that there would be many in the room who aren't aware of that kind of enclosed capacity for danger. Do you know what I mean? We can have 20% of our artists will deal with this controversy, but essentially those main stage opportunities or a big venue platform is reserved for work that is more easily received by the dominant audience. What would you say, I suppose, to institutions, organisations, bookers, backers, and then individual artists about what they can do to challenge that system?
I guess I always bring it back to, do people value indigeneity? And if they do, why do they? And what is the extent of that? Are they willing to give back some of the wealth that they gained as a part of colonial processes that they benefit from today? I think being able to have that conversation with people directly and inquire about how much they're willing to engage with that is certainly, from an Indigenous perspective, a conversation that some people, yes, are ready to have, some aren't ready to have it, but we're ready to have it, and we've been ready for 231 years to have that conversation. So from my perspective, there is a lot of conversation about the giving back of position of Indigenous people to be not a seat at the table in this country, but to actually be the first and foremost leading voice in affairs. And I think once we have a bit more of that, the bookers actually won't have the greatest say in the game. The rightful decision makers of this land will have the right influence that they should have.
Absolutely. I think that is a really beautiful note to end this too short conversation on. I would love to chat with you further, but hopefully I can bail you up in the green room, or I will see you around. But in the meantime, may I please ask everyone here to join together and give their thanks to Neil.
Thank you.
We are now going to move to a panel discussion, which this is not just empty chair therapy for me, which means we will look to fill these chairs. So I'm going to invite firstly Jeremy Smith, who'll be the participating panel chair, and then also welcome his fellow panellists, who I'm hoping are in the green room. I'm having that kind of look around the room where I don't see 5 people getting up from their chairs. Let me announce your names in order. Professor James Arvanitakis, Michael Williams, Jane Crawley, Jodie Sizer, Katrina Sedgwick, and unfortunately, Paula Balla is unwell today and unable to join us. But if I could ask those other individuals to either magically appear from the back of the stage. You know, the longer they let this hang, the more likely it is that I will expose my fundamental challenges around the framing of conferences like this and the way that we do or do not propose radical change to the industry, whether it is around a universal basic income for artists, if it is a redirection of sports funding into arts infrastructure, or if it is a greater alignment across industry sectors, whether it's in technology, sustainability, or health and justice. So I really do suggest that we bring some additional guests before I let you know what I think. I would love some water to put out this bin fire. I do think all of those things, and I'm happy to discuss with any, but I also feel that obviously these are a very worthy set of concerns which are still integral. So I am being cheeky, and I just always feel like when we move diversity and inclusion out of an HR issue, then we will have a much greater opportunity to see some really radical and transformative change that discusses structural power imbalances. Jeremy, how lucky. Ladies and gentlemen, and all those who do not identify with those binary characteristics, please welcome to the stage Jeremy Smith, Professor James Arvanitakis, Michael Williams, Jane Crawley, Jodie Sizer, Katrina Sedgwick, and you'll all be so delighted that you missed that last 2 minutes of padding. Jeremy, I'm going to introduce you, and I'll take up this empty chair right here in the middle, which is where Paula Balla would have sat, so you are welcome to take any chair. But Jeremy, I might then leave you to introduce your guests. I will also probably never be booked as an MC again. It's looking so promising, the Oscars. Jeremy is the Director of Community Emerging and Experimental Arts for the Australia Council of the Arts. His early career was in festivals and the performing arts, following his graduation from lighting design at the Western Australian Academy of Performing Arts. His first taste of community-determined arts and cultural programs was through a fellowship offered by Arts WA. Since then, Jeremy has supported regional arts engagement and forged partnerships with diverse communities throughout his career, having held management and advisory roles in both the public and private sector that delivered community projects in regional and remote areas across WA. It is so lovely to have someone here from WA representing. Jeremy, welcome to the panel. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And I will leave the stage.
Hi everyone, I'm just trying to adjust this alien-like microphone. Hi, can you all hear me okay? Is that, yep, great, thank you. Thank you for that introduction. It was very long and I've got probably one of the world's longest job titles, as everyone can see up there, so it's a privilege to be here. Thank you. Thank you, Diversity Arts Australia, for curating this panel and for asking me to be the participating chair. So that's a key word, I think. If there's any questions from the floor about it being participatory, any questions of me at the Australia Council, please feel free to ask. I'd like to begin, obviously, by acknowledging that we're meeting today on Kulin lands and acknowledge traditional owners past, present and emerging, and thank Janet yesterday for her lovely welcome to country. I'd also like to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation on whose land I currently work and live in Sydney, and then also the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation on whose land I was born and raised, and developed a lot of my own values and beliefs to artistic practice and life in general. I'd also like to say that the land was never ceded, and that the impacts of colonisation is still being felt, and that as we work through that whole area of life in general, that I'm willing to stand behind and beside our First Nation people and thank them for their custodianship of this land and for their time and everything that sort of continues to impact the arts sector. I'd also like to acknowledge people of difference in general, because I think life is nothing without difference, so keep being different and killing it. Look, this panel, we've just all met each other for the first time backstage, and I think there was a whole heap of things that came up yesterday that I'm sure everyone's willing to sort of dive into and go. But look, I think in front of us here in the room, I just want to acknowledge from the outset that we've got a remarkable gathering of leaders, trailblazers, collaborators, co-conspirators, accomplices, however we want to describe it, here in front of us. So thank you all for your ongoing commitment to this space in diversity and inclusion. And I think one thing I wanted to say to begin with, obviously we didn't have, unfortunately Paola is unable to join us. And in light of that, I wanted to see if anyone from the floor would be willing to join us on stage to fill that role of an arts voice and join us on the panel. Is there anyone there that would like to come and join us? I appreciate it's a bit on the spot and last minute, but I felt that was, and I mean in keeping with the fact that obviously a lot of the discussion in this space is about power and privilege. I am a white male who identifies as a person with a disability. I've only done that for 3 years. So I think that whole context of identification is something that probably we shouldn't talk about today, but is a really, really important issue because I'm, yes? Sorry? You wanting to join us?
Yay!
Thank you very much, Coralie. That's really brave of you and we really appreciate it. So as I was saying, look, I mean, I work for a funding agency. I'm a gatekeeper. I'm going to call that now in the context of this conversation that we're about to have. As I said, I've only identified as a person with a disability for the last 3 years. I've grown up all my life as thinking that I had no need to because of a whole raft of complex and sensitive issues that I'm not going to go into now. But I know that I have also, and I led an organisation for a period of time that is an arts and disability organisation during a period in my life where I did not identify. That is really important. Other people identify me every day of my life. And I feel, and you know, I've been a statistic for organisations because I'm tick a box in some instances. But to begin with, that's something that I wanted to really sort of raise as a good sort of context sort of statement for the beginning of this panel. I work with people currently, and I've worked with people in other roles, in other organisations, who also privately identify but do not publicly identify. So I think for the context of this conversation, I just really wanted to sort of make people aware that I think self-identification, particularly in the disability space, is very complex and sensitive, and one that I think deserves a lot more conversation in future forums. So, I've highlighted, I was furiously writing yesterday, and I wanted to sort of note a few of the key remarks that were made that I felt were relevant to our conversation today. But before I do that, I'm going to introduce our panel up here. So it's so wonderful to join, and I've got so many pieces of paper, so you're just going to have to bear with me. The full biographies of all these amazing speakers are available on the website, so I'm going to hopefully encourage you to read the full detail on that. So I'm just going to give you a brief introduction to each of our panels. First, on my far left is Jane Crawley, the Director of Arts Investment at Creative Victoria, and prior to joining Creative Victoria in September 2016, she was the Manager of Arts Melbourne within Melbourne City Council. Please welcome Jane Crawley. Michael Williams, you all heard from yesterday, and he is the Director of the Wheeler Centre here for Books, Writing and Ideas here in Melbourne. Please welcome Michael. Jodie Sizer is a founding partner and co-CEO of PricewaterhouseCoopers Indigenous Consulting, a board member of Collingwood Football Club and chair of the club's Reconciliation Action Plan, or RAP, subcommittee. Please welcome Jodie. Katrina Sedgwick is the director and CEO of ACME. Her previous roles include Head of Arts for ABC TV, Founding Director and CEO of the Adelaide Film Festival, and Artistic Director of the Adelaide Fringe in 2002, and the Come Out Festival for young people in 1999. Please welcome Katrina. And finally, James Arvanatakis, on my left, is the Chair of Diversity Arts Australia and the Pro-Vice Chancellor of Research and Graduate Studies at Western Sydney University. He's also a regular media commentator with over 100 publications to his name. And Coralie, would you like to introduce yourself and your...
Okay, I'm a poet, and my poetry spans books and theatre and film. I'm also an opinion writer. I've been published across the Australian media, and I've also been published internationally in the Washington Post.
Can we please give Coralie a really... That's so, you know... Are you based here in Melbourne?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, great, fantastic. So, some of the takeouts from yesterday that I was writing down. It all began obviously with Jen's lovely keynote, and we cannot underestimate the strength of denialism in this country. However, the arts sector is a key space of representation. Power, where does it live? We saw stories of success in leadership from Footscray Community Arts Centre through its Elder in Residence program and the Indigenous Advisory Committee, and through Accessible Arts Victoria. We heard about the recruitment process and the issues around hierarchy and career ladders, which is not being inclusive. Tanya spoke about navigation and choosing your battles. Deborah told us things happen when people ask for them to happen, and that people perceive her as a leader and being the first. We heard change needs to be forced. We've had enough of nothing. We asked what we really need from allies. The devolution of power from government agencies to bring sector change, otherness and homogeny, what are the gaps and bespoke approaches to getting more diverse people in leadership, we heard from Veronica about the leadership journey that Arts Access Victoria took, and if you're thinking of leaving, to leave a legacy. We are experiencing blatant employment discrimination, someone said. Why are organisations so risk-averse in their hiring policies? And I think my final takeout was Paula's words in her final keynote, sort of, do we sit in the foyer of diversity or are we going to the basement? So, with all of that, we will get underway. So we're going to keep this, the structure of today's panel is going to go for about, our conversation is going to go for about 45 minutes until about 10:15, so that we allow at least 30 minutes from the floor for questions and answers with all members of the panel here today. And I've asked all of our panellists to be quite, well, firstly, we'll be quite brief with our responses, but also to feel free to ask questions directly of each other. I don't want to be the sort of sole question asker. And then when we move to questions from the floor, there's one thing that I like to say in these sorts of forums is that if you've got a question to ask, consider who, and at each time someone asks a question, can we ask that you introduce yourself by name and give a little bit of background so that we know who we're speaking to. And also, that links to what I'm about to say, in that please, if the person before you asked a question that identifies as a white, Anglo, English-speaking person, if someone else has their hand up that probably doesn't identify with any of those areas, ask yourself if it's really your turn to ask the next question. So make sure we have a really fluid lineup of questions coming from the floor. So on that note, we'll get underway. Jodie, I'd always like to begin by giving any panel that I'm on with First Nation representation the chance to have a speak. So in the context of leadership and what we're talking about today, is there anything you'd like to begin by offering?
Well, to kick off, can I just also say thank you for this amazing opportunity. It sounds like, from a brief summary, that we're really up for having the real discussions that are challenging but honest, and really leading into those comments that we've already had today about, for us, what for me is exciting about this year is the truth-telling. Of course, our traditional owners and First Nations people have got such a significant and important role in leading that. And having said that, can I too acknowledge the Kulin Nation and the Wurundjeri people and the Bunurong peoples, and thank them for allowing us to meet upon their lands today. But having just come back today from a month off, so I've got this really fresh outlook and mindset and real genuine excitement about what the year ahead and the next chapter has, even though if you sit long enough and read enough of the media and hang out in Canberra, then it's really easy to get quickly depressed about the challenges and the ceilings that are sometimes placed upon us. But you can probably tell from the short title of where I'm at in PricewaterhouseCoopers and on the Collingwood Football Club, that I'm certainly up for spaces where we can own and take and use the power and the privilege that sits within these massive institutions that have, in the spaces that they occupy, real opportunity to demonstrate what's possible. And if we can crack those spaces in starting conversations with truth, our history, owning that, and then what's possible, I think the potential is endless. And I feel like I'm standing right on the edge of the cliff face where I can see some of that potential, not all of it, but that's what I'm excited about. I think rooms like this, we can really nurture and further explore what's possible by sharing some of the amazing thinking and doing and visions of people that sit around here on this panel, and of course, people from within the room. So I think in a really short summary of where I'm at today, that thank you, and I'm really excited to be here, so thank you.
Thank you. Michael was on stage yesterday and obviously attended part of the sort of proceedings, and I just wanted to ask if you've had any reflections since that, Michael, about...
Lots. Many. I mean, it's so terrific to have this event going on in this building where I work every day, and I know that for myself and my colleagues, it's terrific to have any opportunity to kind of interrogate your own practice and to not let things kind of happen in an unthinking way. Yesterday's panel was a terrific one to be involved with. I was a late replacement for a colleague who's far more articulate than I am. Although seeing Koorie come to the stage today, I see that my definition of late replacement is definitely not late enough. Koorie's raised the bar there, so it's not even worth mentioning. But it was a terrific conversation, but I was also acutely aware of my position of privilege on the panel, not just as a white, able-bodied, heterosexual male, but as the leader of an arts organisation, and the way in which that, as a piece of structural power, affects dynamics in any conversation, both within and outside the cultural sector. And there are a couple of points. Kath Duncan raised a couple of really fantastic kind of incendiary challenges. And I found myself afterwards reflecting on what my response had been. And I didn't deliberately evade anything she said, but I went out of my way to speak from my own position rather than to try and off the cuff respond to any of that. And I realised that straight away with that dynamic, there's a danger that the organisation looks like it's closing ranks or being defensive about what it does. Or I reflected quite a bit in the panel I was on about the nature of failure in this space by organisations. And the thing I wanted to follow that with today and talk about is that wasn't a cry about it being hard. I'm really bored of hearing people in leadership roles talk about how hard it is to have better practice in the inclusion space, in the diversity space, in equity. It's not good enough to moan about it being hard. I was reflecting on failure from the perspective that we need to do better, and from the perspective that this is something that deserves to be a kind of key part of our work. And I think the difficulty of it is beside the point. It's a kind of meaningless idea.
Thank you, Michael. Yes.
That's, if you've ever wondered what the sound of one hand clapping is. Just there. Thank you.
There it is.
Good to have you here,
Look,
Mum.
and thank you, Mike. I mean, I put you on the spot this morning and said if you'd like to sort of do that, so thank you for that. Jane, obviously here as Creative Victoria, as I am a funding agency, you guys are too, and I guess you guys have entered into this partnership with Diversity Arts Australia, and it's one part of a broader suite of inclusion initiatives that Creative Victoria. So do you want to talk a little bit about that and what you're hoping to be the ripple effects more broadly for the sector here in Victoria and further afield?
Yeah, sure, Jeremy. So I guess this symposium today really signals the launch of a broader program called Fair Play, which is a 2-year program that's really using mentorship and capacity building to drive increased representation, particularly on the part of First Nations, people living with disability, culturally and linguistically diverse people in the creative industries, particularly in employment, leadership, but also programming and participation. It's targeted at the whole of the creative industries, so the arts, the screen sector, design and game sectors, and it's targeting those creative industries organisations that the state government invests in on a multi-year basis. So I think in many ways this symposium is really a collective and visible conversation, if you like, that that frames the sorts of things that we are hoping to achieve through Fair Play, but through a raft of other interventions. And I'm hoping that it's a conversation that feeds into a broader change agenda, if you like. As Jeremy said, there's a raft of interventions at the moment. Some of them are very targeted, industry-specific sorts of initiatives like the Fair Play program. There are others like working in partnership with Arts Access Victoria, again over a 2-year period to deliver more of the more iterations of the ADAPT program, looking at disability action training, looking at databases for disability sector, looking at NDIS transition campaigns. Talent Matters would probably be another one at the moment, which is funding to non-government organisations to employ people from underrepresented cohorts. So there's that, there's interventions in business as usual around our grants assessment processes and a whole range of things. There's working with First Nation stakeholders to deliver the First Peoples Plan for the creative industries in Victoria. But I don't want to just list off everything that's happened. I guess what I would say is that there are targeted initiatives, there are interventions in how we do business day to day that are all really around a context of change. And that is the overall context of this symposium. It is about change. And I think from Creative Victoria's perspective, it's reflective of a desire to want to invest in the reality of this state, you know, the communities that live here, the many cultures, the many realities that make up this state, and a desire to acknowledge and support and really bring to the fore just the multiplicity of realities that we live with and in, and shift things from a sort of a standalone pillar, if you like, the diversity pillar or the inclusion pillar, and see that driven in a more integrated way, if you like, right across the whole of the creative industries. There is a desire to see real change and to see things shift into an accepted reality rather than a special event sort of discourse.
Thanks, Jane. James, as the Chair of Diversity Arts Australia, do you want to, I guess, talk a little bit about other work apart from this symposium, obviously, that Diversity Arts Australia are doing that's relevant to today's conversation in relation to sort of diverse leadership?
Yeah, thanks. And yeah, thanks everyone. This is such an exciting moment to be here. I suppose, look, to begin with is a broader philosophy about my own history of work, where I've worked with artists for a long time and often seen artists being at the forefront of change. In fact, creating a sort of sense of change long before people saw it happening. And I'm thinking about the work I did, almost 20 years ago with a bunch of Indonesian artists who were, bridging these gaps and forcing change between cultural understandings between Australia and Indonesia, long before our politicians and our business leaders actually ever realised that there was these really strong community links. And so I suppose most importantly for an organisation like ours, Diversity Arts, is to go, well, we're there to help facilitate that drive to make it happen in programs such as Fair Play, so to create and facilitate the change to happen. Now, more specifically, I suppose, the things that we're doing is we're auditing, so we know, we have a clear picture about what's happening out there. And a lot of times we talk about, how there's a lack of representation, but over the last few months we've been working really hard at auditing some of the top 200 arts organisations in Australia to find out exactly what their decision-making, the diversity or lack of diversity in their decision-making processes look like. And I think that audit will provide us a really great baseline data for building and sort of saying, well, this is the kind of change that, this is what we really need. The second part, I suppose, is targeting. Once we know what the sector really, really clearly looks like, and building on other work that people have done here, is then being able to target, well, who do we want to target, and where can the most effective change be? And that includes specific strategies and working with partners different types of partners who I think are very keen to see this change happen. Some will be arts-based, some will be funders, and it'll vary. I suppose the fourth part of the strategy is to support those who want change to happen. And sometimes, I think I agree that we shouldn't be talking about how hard change is, but I honestly believe, as an executive member of university, sometimes when I'm working with universities, I see that people want change, but don't actually know how to begin the process. So not that it's hard, it's that they're kind of like they don't. It's kind of, what is it? It's sort of like unrecognised ignorance. I don't know where to begin, and so I think it's supporting organisations that want to bring that change around. And the last part, of course, is the advocacy that we do. And I was really heartened to, I wasn't here yesterday, but I followed some of the Twitter feeds, and I was really heartened to hear people talk about the word power, because I think often as advocacy organisations we don't use the word power. And I think confronting those power relationships and bringing about change in those power relationships and disseminating what power means and helping people understand where those power relationships are, I think is really important. So I suppose in a nutshell, that's the kind of the broader direction in which we're heading and the philosophy that underlines it.
Thank you. Coralie.
Yes.
My next question, I had some questions prepared for Paola, but and what I was going to ask her to talk about is in her biography, it references that there was a project that she was invited by Max Delaney to curate at ACCA, and reading the description of that exhibition, it didn't really sort of appear that it was specifically First Nations focused. So I was going to ask her about how, as a First Nations creative, how refreshing and important it was for her to professionally to be asked to lead a project which may not necessarily be First Nations representative. So is there, I guess, do you want to give a bit of an introduction about your own practice and any sort of experiences where you've had that? Obviously, you've been asked to be a creative practitioner because of your diversity versus that's been cast aside and you've just been asked because your art's great, if that makes sense.
Sorry, are you speaking to me?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm sorry, did you say that I'm from...
No, I was sort of introducing the fact that that was a question I was going to ask Paola.
Oh, okay.
So from a practitioner's perspective, she would be involved in projects that would be because she's a First Nation identifying person, but sometimes not, just because of her practice. And I just wanted to maybe see if you've had experiences in both those sorts of situations before.
No, I don't, because... I think with Greek culture at the moment, we're kind of not as included because we're kind of seen as not... We've had our day because of the stereotypes of the past. So I don't get those kinds of opportunities. In fact, a lot of opportunities that I get is because people pull out, like this particular situation. So, but I do have some comments for what's been said so far, which I can contribute. Sorry, because I've been put on the spot here, so I'll do my best. This
is a safe space, so whatever you need to do to make it work.
I really agree with Jodie's comment on honesty, but I feel like there's a lot of fear around being honest as a diverse practitioner. There's the fear of being honest with organisations that hold power because then they close doors on you. There's also a fear of being honest about what you really think and trying to stick to the mainstream view of what it is to be a good, diverse practitioner in terms of the wider diverse community. In terms of the comments made by, so I'm just trying to get everyone's names right. Sorry.
Michael.
Jane. No, not yet. So Jane. Sorry, I'm a bit nervous. Jane, in terms of funding, it's really great to hear that there's all these things happening, but the reality of the situation is I feel I've been in the arts for almost 10 years, and I'm starting to get funding from Cyprus, where my parents are from, and I've never been able to get funding here despite countless applications. I hear you talk about mentorships and stuff, but what about actual money and funding? I think the only way that we're going to get funding is if you start seeing us as equals and not seeing and understanding that diversity isn't about race, it's about embracing the way that different art can be expressed, because there's this idea that literary merit or merit has this colonial view, this English view of that is a high standard of art. But we all come from different places, and we're all going to sound different, and we're never going to be sounding like you, like to get to the mainstream. We want our art to be as it is, which is influenced by our own cultural backgrounds. So, my comments for Michael is that, you know, I've been telling the Wheeler Centre that I want to be on a panel for a long time, and the only time, and he's like, you know, like, oh, you know, understand you've got your obligations and stuff, but, you know, I've been published all over Australia. I've been published in America. You know, my poetry is a best-selling poetry book. You know, I've got a lot of experience, a lot of things I want to share. And like I said, when I get an opportunity to speak, it's because someone's pulled out, you know? So that's my comment so far. Thank you.
Oh, Colin. Can you stay on this panel? Thank you, Coralie. Sorry, am I Coralie?
Yeah, that's right,
Yeah,
Coralie.
thank you. I just wanted to make sure I was. Thank you. Keep thinking and keep listening and keep provoking, please. I'm going to move to Katrina. I think, firstly, to tell us a little bit about ACME and your role there, and I guess what it's like leading a major institution like that, and I guess what steps are incrementally being put in place at ACME around inclusion and diversity. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think the difference in this role for me to previous roles is that obviously there's still a big programming focus and a need to consider diversity across the realm of the breadth of programs that we offer through education, through public programs, through industry programs, and obviously public-facing programs and partnerships. But I think the other really major responsibility in running an institution is that it's an ongoing space for the public. So thinking about audiences and invitation and making sure that we reduce barriers to the welcome that we would like to provide, to try and, we do have a dominant white audience, that is the reality, a middle-class white audience, as most traditional institutions do. How do we tackle that in innovative and very active ways, and apply subsidy carefully to try and shift the doors so that they appear more open to more people? And the third thing then too is that we need to tackle our own workforce. We need to embrace diversity across the institution, and that is in our employment practices across every level. It's not just about programming, it's about every single area in the institution and providing opportunities for staff to come into the arts sector across all touch points and to be supported and nurtured through that. So it's, I would say, what's exciting about it is that it requires a very kind of holistic thinking and approach when we're trying to tackle that. I think we've made some very early steps. I've been with the institution for 4 years, so I'll just talk about the period that I've been there. We certainly have a very different board in place to when I arrived. As I arrived, the Labor Party came in as the new Victorian government 4 years ago, and something was put in place immediately that was seeking to have 50% female representation across all government-appointed boards, and that's been a very effective.
And is it is a government-appointed board, isn't it?
It's a government-appointed board, and that's been a very effective strategy across the sector, and that kind of proactive addressing that quite profound gender imbalance has been a really interesting thing to observe, and certainly has changed on our board. But we also have our first Indigenous board member, Rachel Mazza, came onto the board. We have our first Muslim board representative, Tasneem Chopra, has joined the board. We have our first Asian Australian representative on our board, Terry Wu, is now on our board. So we are starting to have a more diverse cultural representation. In terms of First Nations initiatives on the board, in the organisation, we've appointed 2 Indigenous curators who are working with us, and that's been triggered by the massive renewal that we're undergoing at the moment. And a commitment that we embed Indigenous voices, perspectives, ideas across, again, this holistic transformation of the institution. So supporting those curators is an Indigenous Advisory Board that's chaired by Rachel Mazza, and they have initially come on with a focus towards this transformation we're going through as an institution, but necessarily have begun to spread their interests more broadly. So, for example, they were involved, along with the Indigenous curators, in the development of our first solely Indigenous content-focused exhibition, which is currently on display in ACME, which is a celebration of the Clever Man television series, which I encourage you all to go to for a few more weeks.
Tony was on the panel yesterday, I think.
But, I think we're also trying to put in place broader employment practices where we're actively going to spaces and places and communities where people would not be looking in the usual places that we advertise for employment. So, for example, as we're recruiting, say, for a visitor services officers cohort, which is something where we have quite a lot of opportunity to bring in a significant new group of staff. As a public service organisation, you're not always able to have that flexibility. And we're trying to go and advertise and actively recruit in places outside the usual. I think my head of HR is here and she can correct me if I'm wrong, but it was the Refugee Association, Refugee Talent, was an organisation that we worked with to go out and recruit a number of recently arrived refugees to Australia who've been fantastic contributors to our staff cohort, 2 of whom have remained ongoing in our staff cohort, and it requires that active institutional choice to take those steps and take the time and apply resource to have those different kinds of conversations, because the usual channels do not apply if you really do want to have more diversity in your audience, in your workplace, and I think therefore in your programming.
Thanks, Katrina. That's really great. I might quickly go to Jodie again. And Jodie, I guess from your role there, I mean, if you'd probably like to introduce the work that you do with PricewaterhouseCoopers. And I guess to begin with, tell us anything you feel the arts could learn from, and the creative industries, from corporate Australia in terms of diversity leadership, from your sort of work, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Or indeed vice versa, if the corporate Australia could learn anything from the creative industries.
I am absolutely certain of that. So probably a little bit about me. How did I end up here? I'm an auditor, which is, some people get excited by that, some people don't. So I'm a big lover of process and numbers, and whilst that was my first job out of uni, before that I had worked in community organisation and in the university sector, and by the time I got to doing the audit numbers game, I found it slightly less rewarding than working with people. So I then had worked in a government role where I was supporting Aboriginal communities to develop business ideas, and after a few years of working with government, I felt a little bit restricted in talking about what's possible rather than doing the doing. So I do love, just to pick up a couple of comments early, the point about it's hard. I think when we do use that language, we need to ensure that it's not as an obstacle, it's just as a recognition that we do require effort. And I think that your words there, sorry, Katrina, is, did you say active choice?
Yes.
And that, I love that. I love that. It requires an active, you've got to do. And I love spaces where we can think and we can yarn and we can explore and we can design, but we really do have to do, and that is what is leading the examples, because sometimes we don't actually know what the answer is, and if we're going to create and pave new spaces, we have to be courageous, because it is going to require effort, and that might be hard for some people to do, or it might be systems and practices that restrict us, and it means we have to do 72 things before we get to find the traction. And I think also the safety point, that having environments where you can fail safe. So you can have a go, and if it doesn't work out, then it's not because it was a bad idea, it's because we just have to try and do that a bit differently. So I think that fail safe, and leadership has to create that environment to do that. From leaving for government, I did some consultancy work and was doing a lot of the doing, which I love, but we got to a point where some of the big change that we required a big system change and big nation change and shifting a national narrative. And when the opportunity came from PwC, initially I said, no way, I've been at EY, I know how you guys work, you've got no idea about what we really need and what Aboriginal-led might look like. But to their credit, and after 12 months of discussions, they were up for wanting to know. And I guess the potential of what was possible on a platform of PwC, I felt that government or other stakeholders might listen more to what an opportunity or a solution or a voice might be if it was just Jodie Sizer, the individual. So with the right terms, we designed PIC. So PIC is a separate company. It's a joint venture. We own 51% Aboriginal owned, Aboriginal led, in that we've got a majority Aboriginal board. We have 5 years in, we have 60 staff, of which 64% of our staff are Aboriginal people. We get best talent in field, and the only reason PIC exists is to create meaningful change in Aboriginal communities. So all of our work is Aboriginal led, place-based and client-centred. Our values are truth, respect and self-determination. We've done about 500 projects in about 600 communities, and it is amazing. So I get to be at the front end of a lot of really impressive work that's led by communities, working with communities at the front end, designing, at the back end evaluating, but doing a lot of the doing. What that's meant now in 5 years is, from PwC, who were a small leadership team, is saying this is a good idea with massive potential for impact. It is a shared value, it's based on the shared value initiative from Michael Porter out of Harvard. But to bring that organisation of 8,000 people with 800 partners, of which 17% were women, and I think I was the only Aborigine in the building, then to come and realise the potential and really want to understand and be up for themselves having the conversation about history. What does that mean today? What is our role in this and what can we do? In practical terms, Luke Sayers, to his credit, invited me into his leadership team of 25 people. I don't really want to do that. I feel vulnerable and I get nervous about what the conversation might be, but I think a couple of things, and trying to draw out of the key things, it's really about just knowing your value and your worth. I don't have to ask permission or excuse or try and make a case for our existence to be there or my seat around the table. Sometimes it's just picking and choosing the spaces where you can sort of make a difference. And I'm probably at that end of things now, is I'm a little bit more particular about where I choose to get in and take the effort and the time to have those conversations. And I think these guys are on a learning journey, but what it means in really practical terms is they're about to launch their Elevate RAP, and they've committed to 100 Aboriginal jobs, and they're setting procurement targets to get Aboriginal businesses in. Every one of those staff members has to undertake cultural awareness training, and they're looking to us because PIC has the highest Mojo rating, staff happiness, across the whole business. And it's because we're driven by purpose and because we value our people. And over half our leadership team are women, and we have our co-CEO model, a male and a female. And this stuff, it is an effort in that it's not a painful effort, because it's actually the stuff we know is what make things work. So it's just the logical path, even if it's not the straight line path. It's just what we know is going to get us the good result. And if you're motivated by the good result, the impact that's going to bring what you exist for, then why would you do anything else? So I think that's the PwC story, and Collingwood are at the beginning of that. And as a hardcore Collingwood supporter, what does zero tolerance to racism look like, and what can this organisation, where the spotlight is really bright and has made a lot of mistakes, to say, if we can get it right there, what can that mean for an industry and the power of sport, not dissimilar to the power of the arts? That I think the courage that the arts has had in leading so many conversations and telling the story, importantly, I think that there's no other sector where there's enough references, or as many references to say what people have learnt from Australia's history. And only through knowledge and the honest conversations will we become comfortable to step forward into the doing part, because we get paralysed with fear of doing the wrong thing. And even each year at the start of the year, I meet with my kids' teachers. I live in Torquay, so it's quite a bubble. And I want to make sure the teachers know that they can talk to me about any subject, and particularly Aboriginal affairs if they want to do that. And some just are really uncomfortable. One of them broke into tears and felt really they wanted to cry a lot about things, and because it was hard for her to just process for herself, how do I tackle this? But it didn't mean she didn't want to do it. She's the most genuine and kind and, really smart woman. And some other classes where the teachers have said, it's grade prep, I'm going to teach the grade preps about the apology, and feeling really confident and able to do that. And what does that mean for 5-year-olds to have that conversation? As opposed to the grade 3 teacher last year who was so nervous and didn't want to speak and look, and ended up creating posters that said Aboriginals are awesome. And I don't know how that class went. There were Aboriginals here. Aboriginal is awesome. Let's create some posters. I don't know. So let's get the information. I did have to laugh about it, but I felt we need to create the environments where those, in that example, the teachers can feel comfortable to at least have the conversation with the parents, get access to information, and then the potential is massive, and the time is now, because the embracing of the Australia in its vast majority, I think, aside from some exceptions, is massive of where we're at and where we want to be. So I don't know, maybe that's enough.
It's amazing, Jodie. James, quickly respond, and then I think we'll open to the floor. Thank you, Jodie.
Just picking up a couple of points that Jodie made. I mean, I see this a lot at universities as well,
Yes.
both with the students who really want to ask questions but are really uncomfortable to ask, but also in the executive management who want to bring about change but don't know how to bring about change. And I think one of the philosophies that we've one of the philosophers I've had as now a member of a sort of an executive team within the university that also consults other universities, but also with diversity arts, is that what you want to do is you want to hold people to account but give them space to be clumsy. Does that make sense? It's this kind of interesting balance, and I think that's part of the leadership challenge that we have, is that I think as people become, as people hit these sort of top parts of organisations, it does require more effort, as you said, but also I think people feel that they have less margin for making being clumsy or making those errors. And I think it's you still hold people to account, but then finding that balance about saying, we're going to hold you to account, we're going to demand change, and we want change, and these are the types of changes that we want. But also we're going to be, I don't know if gentle's the right word, but also be a bit forgiving as you trying to figure out how to frame that or how to bring that about. And I think that's one of the philosophies we've tried to adapt with some of the work that we're doing at Diversity Arts.
It's interesting for us in the context of the Wheeler Centre in that, our art form is public conversation, and one of the kind of challenges we set ourselves when we were created 9 years ago was that we wanted to be a space where all different communities could come together to talk about the kind of ideas that were exercising them and defining their lives, and hear from experts on those topics and kind of exchange views. And something that happens over the course of 9 years is those definitions of the communities that feel served by a cultural institution become narrower and narrower on the one hand. So we know the bulk of our audiences who come to this building live or work within a 10-kilometre radius of this building. They're people of the inner city, they're people who probably have various other opportunities. Otherwise, we keep 80% of our events free, and that's really important to us, but the kind of audience that comes still self-selects. And the danger of what happens then is, if you're trying to reflect their conversations, you're not laying down a challenge, you're not having difficult conversations, you're not getting out to people who might not otherwise be hearing it. And I think one of the hardest things to do is not get complacent when you have an audience who want certain things from you. The question you have to ask yourself is, who are the audiences who aren't getting access to this? What are the conversations we're not tapping into? And how do we affect real change with that. And it's, while I think that leadership plays a very important role, I also know that most cultural organisations at their best aren't taking it from the top, they're taking it from the artwork, and they're taking it from they're taking it from the artists themselves and being led by that. And I think we do our best work when we don't think that we can centralise that decision making, but actually we can use our resources to empower different conversations, different communities to produce the art themselves.
Thank you. I'm conscious that we've got about 25 minutes left, and I'm sure there's people out there that wish to ask questions of our panel, and even our panellists may wish to ask additional questions of each other at the same time. So I'm going to open it up, and bear in mind what I said during the opening remarks about sort of consider who has asked the question before you and think if it's really your turn. So have we got microphones ready and waiting? So either side, yes. So if you can, if you've got a question, just introduce yourself, and given we've got such a large panel, if there's a specific person that you're wanting to ask that question of.
Excuse me, Jeremy.
Yes, Jane.
Just, while we're waiting for a question, I guess I'd be curious, you and I both work in funding agencies. And one of the things that strikes me about that, apart from the fact that we have to take personal accountability,
yes,
is the traditional fear of letting people sort of take control of how programs and investment strategies are designed. And I think, what's your reflection on that from the Australia Council? Because I think, my own experience with this, and a little bit to your point about the funding programs, there's no doubt at all that those general so-called mainstream funding programs advantage and disadvantage particular cohorts. But I think it has been the case that largely the design of those strategies and programs has been led by the bureaucracy.
Absolutely, yeah.
So a key thing, it seems to me, is actually relinquishing some of that. And I'm not, I will say the two words, but I know everyone loathes them, co-design. I don't just mean that, but I mean there is something about the act of relinquishing complete control around design that I do think is critical, and it seems to me we are only at the beginning of that. What's your thoughts on that?
By structure, I sit within Council's leadership team, but I don't have any direct reports in the way that Council's now designed. And I do have people internally that fiercely protect me in not being the go-to for all issues to do with disability, but there are inherent things that people sort of will just run things past me because they feel that way. When Council restructured, one of the areas that did grow as opposed to reduce was our research and knowledge management team, and I think through a lot of our research program now, which is broad whole of sector as well as very specific on certain issues and trends and whatnot, we use that as both an advocacy platform and a knowledge base to then design programs and whatnot. So the recent, Arts and Disability Mentoring Initiative came out of a lot of consultation that happened as a result of the evaluation of the previous 3-year grants commitment that Council made. And so that's been one way. And obviously, when the grants program was redesigned in 2015, we went from, I think it was 150 different funding programs and criteria with different criteria for each of those categories to 3 core categories essentially, to really try and open it up, to sort of increase success rates for first-time applicants, from whatever background, but then also to encourage more sort of success through diverse programs as well. And that also then refreshed the old art form board structure where we had a lot more voice through the decision-making and assessment-making process as well. And through those assessment meetings too, we sometimes at the end of those use those as forums to test ideas and just, and that's part of my job as an arts practice director across both the community arts and cultural development and emerging and experimental arts sectors to actually, you know, I'm really in Sydney at the moment doing a lot. But to actually sort of then try and influence strategies, policies and decisions by council through the stuff that I get gleaned from forums like this and other sector engagement activities. I don't know if I'm talking around the question but it's tough. I mean, you know, and it's tough, says the person from a funding agency. But, you know, that's, again, sort of it comes down to that sort of, I have chosen to wield influence and choose my battles internally, where I can see there's like a little door ajar.
Can I add something to that?
Sure.
I think that it's, unless you know how to speak the speak, it's almost impossible to get funding. And if you want to mentor us, why don't you give like culturally diverse people someone that can write their grant application for them, you know, or like, because if I've got a really, really great idea, but I don't know how to speak the funding speak, how am I going to get funding? And it's not just, applaud. And it's not just that, it's when we talk about honesty, I want transparency. I want to know how many culturally and linguistically diverse people are applying for funding and how many people are getting it. I want to know across the board, arts organisations, I want transparency. We have statistics for certain parts, like Screen Australia, the program where they had like 50% women, you know. There are programs like that for Indigenous people, like we want 50% boards of Indigenous people. But what about like overall diversity of culture, like of art from diverse people? Where is the statistics? I want to see statistics. So have people, organisations accountable. Like, you know, we can talk fairy tales and that, but I want to see figures. I want to see evidence.
Coralie, I'm just pleased to report, and I'm conscious that there are people with their hand up. Two things in response to that. In our Disability Action Plan that was launched in 2017, the Australia Council has committed to public diversity reporting by the end of 2019. So that's a work in progress for us. And then secondly, that obviously it comes as a lot of people would have seen our new Chief Executive, Adrian Collette's recent media coverage in terms of diversity. And at the moment, we've got a new strategic plan that's under that needs to be launched by the end of August this year. And I'm pretty 90% sure that there will be a pillar around the arts reflecting our society. To help sort of,
That actually hasn't been consolidated data.
Exactly.
It's a massive issue.
And it's a really big issue. And that's broader than the arts issue as well, because as I said before, around that thing around identification and
And that's the, that's the report we've been working on as well. And just quickly, that report we've been working on as well. And I'm not going to obviously name organisations, but there's been a massive backlash by some organisations when we asked them to be accountable to their diversity, to the point that we've actually had other organisations calling us to put pressure on us to drop the project. So people don't like those numbers. I think it's a really fair point.
But in the UK, I was speaking to an artist from the UK, and apparently those figures are mandatory in the UK. So why aren't they mandatory here? I'm
going to move to the floor. Okay, so let's, yes.
Creatrix Tiara, independent writer, performance artist, producer. We've been talking about recruitment a lot in the last day or so. And I want to know how much is counterproductive by the job ads always looking for the best, the top quality, the high quality. And I understand why companies are looking for people like that in general. But like Coralie said, the idea of what's best or top is already a colonial patriarchal concept. And, you know, that sort of always looking for like the top-notch people, you just end up with people floating laterally, like CEOs only hire CEOs. No one gets to move in, no one gets to move up. You don't get any sort of diverse, unusual perspectives from people moving just sideways. So can we fix the way we recruit people so we're not just looking for the best, whatever that means? And you know, what are we compensating for? We want the best, but are we even paying them their worth or not?
I'd just comment, I think that's absolutely right, the notion of what's best. And, you know, the problem is that you tend to recruit and appoint things that are familiar to you. And so if everybody is a white guy, you're tending to recruit white guys, and the classic example of this is the Berlin Philharmonic Orchestra that was on, I think it's Berlin, maybe I've got the wrong orchestra, let's go with Berlin. They had absolutely male-dominated orchestra players. They brought in a new way of auditioning players where you couldn't see them, you could only hear them play, and they are nearly at gender parity as a result of that initiative. And I think that's a very interesting example of such a crazy intervention. I mean, it's mad, but it worked. You have to make active change, and you have to choose actively to not go down the safe path of familiarity, which is what does normally happen.
And I think also looking at the questions that you need to ask, if you are a larger organisation and using a recruitment agency, what is their track record, A, in the art space, and what are the bespoke approaches that they're willing to put in place for that? Jane, yes.
Yeah, I agree, it's a massive challenge. I think who wields the power in the organisations that drives the way recruitment happens? And in the arts, that's usually the boards, they're the employers. So I think there's a lot of reform that is needed around how the government articulates its expectations of governance. What are our expectations of boards? Who are we appointing to boards? Because, you know, I think when there's changes made in that space, combined with different forms of support and investment, then you get the appetite to do things differently. And it is for that reason that I think we need to approach this change agenda in many ways and from many levels. Partly it's the boards, partly it's government expectations, partly it's funding, partly it's a whole bunch of initiatives, and we need to be doing a whole lot of things simultaneously to really drive that change.
Over here to the left, front. I can't see. Can we? Yeah.
We've got one back row there on your right, on our right.
Okay.
He's already.
Janice Florence from Arts Access Victoria. This is a question for Katrina from ACME. I noticed that in talking about diversity, you talked about cultural diversity. You didn't mention disability, and I'm wondering if this reflects a focus of ACME. When I'm thinking about disability and diversity, I'm thinking about captioning films, about audio description, about employment of people with disability, about marketing accessible screenings to people with disability, and also about having someone with a disability on your board and perhaps cooperating with the other film festival, which is produced by Arts Access Victoria.
Thank you. So, thank you for that question. Yes, disability is a key priority. We're developing a policy. Again, Leslie, can you give me the exact name of our access and disability plan? Yeah, so we've been developing that with our staff over the last 18 months, and we have a range of different strategies around accessibility. We've just begun, for example, a range of initiatives for better access to our exhibitions. So, for example, we're bringing in relaxed moments for people, for example, with autism, to be able to access both our temporary and our permanent exhibitions. We only began those programs a year ago, far too late. They have been working really well. They will now be an ongoing part of our program. The building itself has a range of different issues in terms of physical access into the building, and again, that's a critical part of the renewal in those areas that we control, and we're working with an accessibility consultant to make sure that we're as compliant as we possibly can be. In terms of captioning, that's absolutely a challenge and something that we're not able to meet 100% with the number of films that come through the building and our reliance on the distributor to be able to deliver those films fully captioned. It's just not something we're always able to do, but it is something that we're committed to try to address. We do have hearing loops in the building. In terms of the festivals, at the moment we have about 20 different festival partners, and it's a very broad range of events. I'm not aware of discussions that we've been having with Arts Access Festival, and perhaps we can talk about that after this session to learn more about what you're proposing there. Is there anything else you'd like me to address? Employment, well, again, we at the moment we do not have an active strategy targeting disability in our employment process, but obviously in terms of a quota, but obviously we are as open and enthusiastic to have that diversity within our workforce. And there are employees who identify as disabled in our cohort now, but it is not an active priority in the same way in terms of going out to specific channels. We haven't started doing that yet. We have been very much looking at cultural diversity, particularly in terms of recently arrived migrants, and that partnership with refugee talent has been really important. And we're developing partnerships with Aurora at the moment to try and actively recruit Indigenous graduates to our cohort across the board, and we're continuing to try and develop those partnerships. And in terms of disability, the disability sector, that will be part, but as I say, we're beginning this process. And the board, again, we are working with government to try and ensure that our board does have a diverse representation on it. As I said, it's early steps, and I've cited the 3 board members who've come on that are relevant to this institution, relevant to this conversation at the moment, but it is ongoing and it is something that needs to be addressed, absolutely.
Thank you. Just here, yeah.
Claire Coleman, I'm an independent writer. There's been a lot of talk at this event about achieving greater parity in the act of creation in the arts industry. I've been to a lot of events over the last few years, and when sitting up on that stage, generally, even in this space to some degree, you're looking out over a sea of grey hair and white faces.
That's me.
Now, my question is, as people who are involved in leadership and talking about leadership in the arts industry, do you actually have an active policy, rather than just words, about increasing the engagement of diverse communities in the audiences? Not just making spaces available, but maybe subsidised tickets for more diverse people to events. For example, I'm not sure, but I imagine that I might be the only Indigenous person sitting in this audience right now. I could be wrong. Apologies if I am, but that's probably true. So what is being done? Because people always say that you need to produce art for your audience, and I've been aware of the last couple of years that I need to produce art for my audience, which is basically, generally for literature, and apologies if I insult you, white women over 50.
I'm just going to own it.
That's so funny, Jane. I was going to own it too. So
no, bugger off. I'm owning it first.
In my heart, I'm a white woman over 50.
No, you're bloody not.
No, I was going to say, it's very...
I love you, but you're not.
We could take this outside,
okay.
Jane.
Jane will win.
I can answer
from an arts, I was just going to, on the literature thing in particular, it is a challenge, and it is one of our key areas that our strategy is focused on. It's a bit the point I was making before about physical geography, I think. I mean, most of our events are free. We, through the expression of diversity on our stages, we hope that that allows people to see themselves in the conversations that are happening and want to be involved. But I think physical geography and timing limits how much genuinely diverse audiences come to what we do. And so part of that is about the recording of everything we do and trying to find ways to make that freely available and out there more widely. So to think about our audience is not just limited by those who can come to a room in the Melbourne CBD at 6:15 on a weekday and give over their time. So that's part of it. And the other part of it is trying to physically take the events out to communities, and not just across regional Victoria, which is often the way people talk about taking their events out, but thinking about it both in the outer suburbs and even the inner suburbs, the places where people are more likely to be able to engage if it's happening in a local town hall than they are if it's coming into the city. So that's a bit of it's imperfect, but I think you're right. Audience is crucial. Sorry, Jen.
Can I add something? Sorry, no, you go ahead. You know, a couple of years ago there was the Antipodes Writers' Festival at the Wheeler Centre, and it was I think they hired the space to have a literary festival for Greek Australian writers. And I think that when you talk about audiences, Michael, I think, you know, there are people that will come from different communities. Like, all you have to do is, for example, advertise in, like, for example, the Greek community has their own newsletter. Like, you have to just reach out to community and say, we're doing this. You know, it appeals to migrant communities, and talk to the Greek Centre, talk to, you know, I don't know what other community organisations there are out there, and advertise to those people, and people will come. Like, my sisters, they read. Like, people I know, they read, but they're not interested in coming to any of this stuff because it doesn't appeal to them. You know, that's what I'm saying. Thanks.
You did touch on decision making, and I just wanted to say, can I have a show of hands, apart from questions, which we'll get to next shortly, who here has been a peer assessor for the Australia Council? Because, I mean, you sit there and say, and that's something all of you can apply to do. And Jane as well. So there will be a call out later this year.
I don't want to be a peer assessor. Who wants me as a peer assessor? I reckon Claire's question is a really important one, and kind of almost a bit taboo, to be honest, you know? Like, so there are obvious things that you can say in response, like the composition of assessment panels. So I could sit here and I could say, yeah, we've driven change in that space, and I feel really proud of staff and colleagues who've made that shift, and I think I can say, yeah, we're sitting at about 63-65% chairs and members who are not straight white people, for example, you know. But still, there's that really hard question about the artistic content, about the artistic product and the read of that. And panels are clearly really critical to that, making sure that the decision makers are actually across cultural content that just isn't all coming from the one pointy head end sort of place, you know. But I wonder whether, but still I don't think those funding programs work. I don't think that we can underestimate, really the incredible privilege that we have just by being here today, all of us. We can't underestimate the numbers of people that never come into the CBD. We can't underestimate the fear and terror that people feel about Creative Victoria, which might strike us inside as really effing weird, but it's true, you know. We can't underestimate the people that have never heard of Creative Victoria, let alone not gone to the website. That's hard to keep that consciousness day by day, you know, it's critical. I kind of wonder, you know, whether the whole investment strategy around different practices works or not. And I don't think we know the answer to that question. So I feel like It is partly how assessment panels are composed. It is partly about the consciousness that you must bring with your privilege to the roles that you have. And I mean, like all of us, because all of us here are relatively privileged, I think, particularly us up here. But I wonder whether it isn't time to start looking at how we are investing in creators. And we are going to need to do that by listening and by working with people who are actually creating content that is not being supported. Because I don't think we've got the answers. And I'm just not wholly convinced that, yeah, Vic Arts Grants is or can legitimately be the answer to every need. And very, very quickly, an example of this from a regional perspective was there was an initiative called the Regional Centre for Culture, and Creative Victoria offered a funding program that you could only apply for if you lived in a particular area. And never was it brought home more plainly the hundreds of extraordinary people living, you know, in that particular part of Victoria that had never been to Creative Victoria, you know, never had any experience, never had any investment. Wherever you look, if you lift up that stone, there are thousands of people doing incredible things. So we need to kind of approach it a bit differently. And I think, yeah, we just need to listen and work in partnership, and we need to try a few more new methodologies that may not have been used before, in addition to what we're already trying to reform. Because that's a key one. If I had $1 for every, no rudeness, but every, you know, right-on young white man that is, you know, an artistic director genius in his own mind and has a complete hold on what makes good content, yeah, I'd have an investment portfolio.
Here, Jane.
Jeremy, so
we do. I'm getting the wind up.
Can I make one very small point, Jeremy, which is Claire introduced herself as an independent writer. She's the author of one of the best Australian novels you might read in recent years. If you haven't read Terra Nullius, you should go out and get a copy because...
Hashtag fangirling.
And Jeremy, can I just say one other really, really quick thing? Sorry, I'm jumping in there.
Sorry, go.
Another organisation that I'm on the board is the Australian Institute of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Studies. We're in Canberra. We've got the largest collection in the country. We are always asking ourselves as a board, how do we get better access and what should we be knowing? And the voices that we hear in the room today are so critical for us. I always love being held to account by those who are intended to be the beneficiaries of the work that we do. So I never underestimate, never hesitate to reach out in a public forum or whether it's by an email, because that is a big accountability piece and just shifts our attention to those priorities. And I'm going to go back and have a conversation about disability at AATSIS and say, we haven't even talked about this and we just did our strategic plan. We're so focused on how we get to all nations, but thank you.
I'm getting the wind up, but the mics are still out there, and so I'm sorry, we're going to have to call it there, unfortunately, I'm sorry. I'm getting the wind up, don't blame me, I'm getting the wind up. So it's 10:48, we've already gone 3 minutes over, so I'm going to be around, so find me for the rest of the day or whatever. But look, I'd really like to firstly thank Koorie for stepping up to begin with. And thank all of our panellists, Jane, Michael, Jodie, Katrina and James. Thank you, and thank you again for listening to us. Oh, and this is tea break, so come back in 10 and 15 minutes. 11:15, sorry, okay, right, 11:15.
So you're a wanderer.
I've been held up in the city for a while due to the rain.
Oh, I see. So as soon as it stops raining, you'll leave.
I hope that the rain will never stop. If it continues, I'll be able to stay here forever.
2, check 1, 2. This is me checking. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Hey, that's. Hey, we're 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. There we go. Hey. 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 That one?
Seems wet.
No. Just no. I don't want to lie. Can't tell the truth. It's over.
Doesn't matter. I love you. None of it matters.
Too late. I don't love you anymore. Goodbye.
Hi, everyone. I'd like to welcome you back to your seats as we return for our next session, which, following the deep belly energy of our last session, is going to look at building Aboriginal cultural competency. Rob, I want you to go back in so you can make your entrance. Rob Hyatt is the Education Manager from the Koorie Heritage Trust. Gently welcoming everyone back. I'm beginning to recognise a few people from their Twitter profiles, so don't make me call you out by name. Pardon? I need a bell. So interesting. I'm sure there are other Filipinos in the room. I have seen you on the socials. But my mum makes a little noise whenever she needs you to come to attention, and it's incredibly quiet. So no, she doesn't ring a bell. She just goes, and then I know I have to come. And literally, I was in the supermarket the other day, and someone made that noise to another Filipino child, and I was like, what? Where do I gotta go? I gotta go? Anyway, so get back. Sit in your seats. Apologies if that is culturally impolite in your context. Thank you so much for coming back to attention. I felt so much of the energy and vibrancy of the discussion and the challenge and the controversy in our break conversations, which I think is exactly the sort of provocation that we're hoping to incite here. Rob Hyatt is the Education Manager at the Koorie Heritage Trust. He's patiently waiting in the wings here for an enormous big entrance. I hope you will support him when that happens. For those of you who don't know the Heritage Trust, they deliver training to organisations on building cultural competency. The programs are designed to introduce participants to the history, culture and identity of the Victorian Aboriginal people, fostering an understanding of contemporary communities through awareness of the past. I know it sounds so serious. A key component, sorry, Rob was making a face down here at the end. I think when you read someone's full bio, it's intrinsically stressful for the person because you know you have a big CV to lead up to, all right? A key component is understanding the diversity of Aboriginal Australia and the complexities of Aboriginality and identity historically and today. This is a presentation and an exercise, so it is a wonderful chance for you to leave aside your passive observer participant face and to put on your active, engaged, connected participant face because Rob Hyatt now has a wonderful half an hour with you all to connect around Aboriginal cultural competency. Please welcome him.
Okay, thank you for the introduction, and obviously it does get a bit embarrassing when you're hearing about yourself. I always thank when I get a clap right at the start, because if I turn out to be crap, you can't take that back. All right, so that's all good. So before I start, I'd like to acknowledge the lands of the traditional custodians that we're meeting on today, so the people of the Kulin Nations, and in particular the Wurundjeri people, and pay my respects to elders both past and present and emerging, and also pay my respects to all the First Nations people present with us in the room today. It's really important, I guess, the work that we do at the Koorie Heritage Trust. I'm assuming that's my clicker, so that's all good. And as introduced, we do run cultural competency programs. In the past, and I've been doing this sort of work for over 25 years, we talked about cultural awareness, and typically it was a lot of work around just understanding Aboriginal people, understanding culture, providing facts and knowledge and those kind of things. And we've actually moved into the space of calling our programs cultural competency, because we did get questioned quite a lot around it's great having facts and knowledge about other people's, but how do we actually use it? And it becomes a really important element of actually talking through those processes of using the facts and knowledge you do have about other people and making that knowledge more meaningful in that sense. Now, in terms of the work that we do, and my slide works, that's just a snapshot of what we do, and the main key part to that is that word Aboriginality. So we talk about Aboriginality and identity, and it becomes a major theme throughout the process of what we do, on whether we run one of our half-day workshops or one of our full-day workshops. And it really is key to understanding Aboriginal people. We quite often get homogenised as one group of people in Australia. The other side of it is that romantic view of Aboriginal Australia, especially, I guess, from a tourism point of view, because we are a little bit in the tourism game, and that is that Aboriginal Australia is Central Australia, the desert, the outback and the bush. And what we do at the Trust is actually promote the fact that a lot of Aboriginal people are urban and live in our urban spaces, and it becomes really important that we promote Aboriginal Melbourne as a key to a lot of the work that we do as well. And it becomes really important then to understanding Aboriginality and identity from a historical sense and a traditional sense, but also understanding how Aboriginal people see themselves today in all of their diversity as well. Now, in terms of the Trust, a lot of the work that we do is what I call the 3 Ps around preserving our unique cultural heritage of Aboriginal Victoria. And it was established in 1985 through the old museum to actually allow the Aboriginal community to have a say on what happens with their artefacts and what happens with their culture and how it's stored, how it's preserved, how it's promoted, how it's presented in those sort of areas. So we do have an element of the Heritage Trust that actually is a collections, and the Heritage Trust actually has collections from pre-contact all the way through to artworks that we still buy today. And that becomes really important to us because it's actually then a promotion of a living culture. That we're not actually just a museum culture, but a living culture today that's alive, strong and vibrant. And there's a lot of Aboriginal people, particularly through the arts, that are actually still practicing their cultures. Some of it looks contemporary and there's different mediums being used, and some of our best artists in Victoria are photographers. And it's just a different medium again, but it's still an expression of culture from that point of view. So we actually move into that promotion of Aboriginal Victoria and a living, vibrant culture, as well as then obviously the protection side of it. Now, in terms of the work that we do, I did have an exercise today that's a small snapshot of how we do look at Aboriginality. But the key for us is the fact that identity isn't just about Aboriginal people, and culture isn't just about Aboriginal people. We do push and promote through our workshops and our other workshop that we've now developed called Cultural Safety, that everyone has culture. Regardless of your background, every person has culture. It can be as simple as just your lifestyle, let alone what you might see in other groups around ceremony or dancing and all of those kind of things. But it's about understanding how your culture then influences how you look at other cultures, how you look at other people, how you might communicate with other people. We might discuss the unconscious bias and the lens of simply how you were raised and how that influences how you think about other people. And so it's about making sure there is a true connection. So we do actually ask people to think about their own identity and how they view those. So in terms of the exercise, we have this slide sitting up here. And what we would actually like everyone to do right now, if you have a piece of paper that you can write on, even if it's just a scrap piece of paper, actually, little cards. The cards are even better. Just for the next couple of minutes, actually write a little bit about yourselves against those dot points. And then as we go through, if anyone wants a little bit of support on what we mean by those dot points or how other people go through the process, I'm happy to help out if people do raise their hand and ask a question. So time starts now. Should have arranged some thinking music. Can I have a quick show of hands? Who's finding this difficult at the moment? About half the room, that's good. It's not a bad thing. I'll explain as we go through. Okay, we'll go 2 more minutes. Okay, we'll do pens down so we can keep things moving. Now, can I have another show of hands? Who did find that difficult? Okay, so whenever we deliver these, we do have quite a number of people that do say they find that process difficult. Now, more importantly, can I have 10 volunteers bring their cards up, please? There's one. Come on. I promise it won't hurt. Okay, for those 10, nothing to be nervous about. Just for the moment, I'm going to sit them on the table. And I'll leave you to think about your own answers and your identities and how you view yourselves. In a typical presentation, we would actually go quite a bit of time looking at Aboriginality and understanding those sort of things, but this process can become quite important. So when we look at those dot points, everyone was okay with name, yeah? I hope so. You're in trouble if that was actually your hardest part. The bottom point, something to be proud of about yourselves. We added that in because I do believe that if you have something to be proud about yourself, then you have strength in your identity. Pride and self-esteem go a long way to actually having a strong identity, okay? And it's really important. We first added that in after my experience of running youth leadership camps for young Aboriginal people from around Victoria. We ran a whole series of camps over a number of years, they're 14, 15 years of age. And what we found quite often at the start of those camps, where a few kids would actually put their hands up and say they're not proud to tell people that they're Aboriginal. They're not proud to tell people of their heritage because they've learnt when they first identified in school or wherever it might have been, they faced racism for the first time, they were ostracised for the first time. Even worse is when they face the stereotypes, where they're being told by other people, oh, your family must be like this, your community's like that, your dad's maybe an alcoholic, your mum's on drugs, whatever it might be, and it becomes a real hard thing for young Aboriginal people to stand up and be proud when they're told that that's what their life is like. Some have even said in the classroom, they've been told by teachers, don't worry about getting here. The Aboriginal kids usually get to at least there and they make it, and that's okay. So to start thinking that being Aboriginal maybe is actually what makes you less, makes it really hard to be proud of your own identity. So it becomes a really important thing to have that pride and that self-esteem. Now, in terms of those other ones, we quite often do ask, when you meet someone for the first time, you exchange names. Everyone exchanges names. What do you think is typically the most common next question that people would ask? What do you do? Who said, what do you do? Who would agree with what do you do? Because I reckon we probably get that one 90% of the time. Sometimes there's where you're from. they see a different name, an accent or a look, and they're interested maybe where you're from. But I think that what you do comes up the most. It's almost like a status thing. If I know what you do for work, I can relate to you in how we relate together, and I can put a status around you from that perspective. Now, what we push is that when two Aboriginal people meet for the first time, almost as everyone else, you exchange names, but almost always the next question is, who's your mob? Who's your family? Who you're related to? It becomes a really important process for Aboriginal people to go through. That's almost your status thing rather than what you do for work. Because if I know your family, I know where you're from, and I know where you fit. And quite often, that answer then relates to community, relates to cultural background. I know in my experiences across Victoria, if I met an Aboriginal person that said that their family were Briggs, I'd know most likely they're from up around the Goulburn Valley, probably around Shepparton as their community, and therefore most likely identifies Yorta Yorta. So that connection becomes really important in understanding your identity from a family point of view, a community point of view, and a cultural point of view. And that's where the strength comes in. But what we would then talk about is the history and past practices and policies that have impacted on Aboriginality and identity. So when we look at things such as the stolen generations and that impact across Aboriginal people over a number of generations, it was not just a removal from family. It was actually a removal from community and therefore a disconnect from culture as well. So it's really important when we work with Aboriginal people today, when we promote Aboriginal artists or whatever they might be doing in their walk of life, that cultural element is so strong because it really is a strength of their identity. And it's the same when we do talk about art. No matter what they're putting down as their piece of art, it's an expression of their identity, an expression of their culture. So to actually work and keep that strong becomes really important. And that's why that process becomes so important around Aboriginality and identity. But it's also why we put it out there for other people to do, because it becomes a thinking process to understand a little bit about how that works. So when we talk about Aboriginality, this is actually my last slide, we talk about feelings and spirituality. We talk about how strong those things are to connecting to family and community. The other side to that then is the family and community relationships and how important those things are. It's not just about a look, it's not about skin colour. What we talk about within the Aboriginal community is that it's about how strong you identify as an Aboriginal person in your heart and in your mind. And we quite often do have, again, that romanticised view of Aboriginal Australia, and some of the most offensive things that come across for Aboriginal people is questioning that identity. We have a lot of diversity within the Aboriginal community, and that diversity can be in look and it can be in lifestyle. I identify as an Aboriginal man. Regardless of the colour of my skin, I am accepted in my Aboriginal community and within my family as an Aboriginal man because that's how I identify, and I have that strength in my identity, having gone through my own process and my own life journey, understanding that my grandmother had been part of the stolen generations, removed as a young baby from a mission here in Victoria called Lake Tyers at the start of her life, having her birth certificate changed and those kind of things. Filling out that card was difficult for me if I was to look back over the first 18 years of my life. I spent the rest of my life actually making that connection, establishing my culture and establishing my identity. So it becomes a really important process from that sense. So it doesn't matter about how you look, it doesn't matter about your lifestyle, but it's that acceptance. And some of those more offensive things I get asked is, oh, so how much are you? What percentage are you? Are you a half caste or a quarter caste? Can you tell me a bit more about those things? One of the worst ones I've ever been asked is which bit? And I'm not quite sure if I'm meant to have a big black spot on my bum or something like that, but I don't know how you explain it in bits. But for Aboriginal community, there's no half caste and quarter caste. They're from past practices and policies. So the work with Aboriginal people is to understand that that's how that person identifies and understand that that diversity exists. And that's a modern context of Aboriginal diversity, let alone the traditional and still practiced today around identity when you look at 38 language groups, 38 nations across Victoria, over 270 nations across Australia. That's a lot of diversity in culture, a lot of diversity in ways of life, a lot of diversity in cultural practices such as ceremony and those kind of things. So we push that when you're working with Aboriginal people, practicing cultural competency, practicing cultural safety, is to allow that person to be who they are as an Aboriginal person. Not to homogenise as one group, not to come in with expectations that because they're Aboriginal, their artwork's going to look like this, or they're going to sing like this, or they carry their language or whatever it might be. It's allowing the individual to express their own individuality that is an expression of their culture and how they connect to their own families and their own communities. So if I was to take those pieces of paper, okay, and we talk about how important identity is, all right, we've had a lot of situations where we still have Aboriginal people asking the questions, where am I from? Who is my family? What is my culture? And it's an ongoing process that is practiced here, there and everywhere right across this country. The Heritage Trust has a family histories unit that actually deals in genealogy and research for individuals trying to reconnect to their Aboriginality and their families. They've still got over 800 cases just in their small unit, let alone our national programs like Link Up and those sort of groups. So there's a lot of people still that can't fill that out because they're missing those answers still, and those gaps exist. On occasion, obviously, within the modern world, we still have current issues, things such as being ostracised, things such as racism. And I'm sure a lot of people in this room have faced racial abuse before or been ostracised for some reason. It's just a thing that happens. In a perfect world, it wouldn't, but it does happen. So if I was actually to abuse anyone in this room right now and ostracise you or racially abuse you, the last thing I'd want to do is get to know you, because that makes it too hard. I've never seen a perpetrator of those sort of things actually ask that person, who's your family? Where are you from? Who's your community? What's your culture? Okay, now that I understand that, I think I still will attack, because that's how I feel. People see difference and that's what they attack. So if I wanted to do that to any of these people that handed these in, the easiest thing for me to do would be to just say, you know what, your identity doesn't matter. It's much easier for me to just throw you away and do that. And again, I can do that one. And those people now don't count. Their identity's been destroyed, and it's an ongoing process that we continuously battle. Not just Aboriginal people, but a lot of people. Our diversity within our broader communities face those things. What we get left with are Aboriginal people with a bit of identity there, maybe a little bit over there, maybe some down there. And if they're lucky, we can put it all back together. That's the work that the Family Histories Unit does, or what Link Up does for Aboriginal people. Unfortunately, some people won't have all the answers. They'll never feel whole in that sense. Sometimes they'll have those gaps, and they may fill the gaps with, you know, the wrong things. It could be, you know, suffering mental abuse. It could be trauma and those sort of things. Could be substance abuse, alcohol, whatever it might be. When we work with Aboriginal people, our main push to move away from those factors within our lives is to actually push culture. And that's where culture becomes really, really important for Aboriginal people to understand. And like I said before, it can still be their own individual expression of culture. And that's where, when we look at the arts world, it's doing so much for Aboriginal people to be able to express themselves, to actually find their identity and put that in a context that they can display to the rest of the world, or to whoever's viewing that piece of artwork at that moment in time, or whatever it might be. So to actually look at diversity within art is to actually understand the individual that did it, but then the context of their own identity and how important understanding diversity is. Okay, that's it for that component, and happy to take questions. I think there's microphones getting around. I think I left about 5 minutes. If no one asks a question, we'll make you do that again. Oh, down the back. There's only one hand up, so it must be you. Oh, there we go.
Yeah, sorry. Sorry, I didn't realise the mic was coming. You started by saying that people ask, what do you do? That's a way of placing you in relation to their values or lives.
Yep.
You didn't say it that way, but I guess my question isn't asking who you are as in your family and your identity also doing that, and what is the difference in value of approaching it that way?
I think from an Aboriginal perspective, understanding who you are and your identity and in relation to other Aboriginal people is to understand family and community, and therefore your culture as well. Where I think flip side to that in asking what do you do, it's almost like placing a status on it in the material world, and actually comparing yourself to somebody else rather than actually making a connection on, you know, that sort of social level, if that makes sense. And so actually that connection to family is actually almost more important than what do you do. I worked for state government for 17 years. My family's all down at Lake Tyers on the community just outside Lakes Entrance still. And my first time heading down to Lake Tyers in a government car, it had red plates on it. And I'd been visiting family for, 20 odd years. And the moment I rocked up in a government car with red plates on it, I jumped out. I had 3 cousins approach me and say, "What's going on, cuz? Are you still one of us?" And almost that what do you do was a disconnect rather than actual connection. And so it's more looking at that material world versus the personal social connection makes that difference from that sense.
Hi, thanks. From Gippsland, so love your work. I was just wondering about what is your vision and how do you see Aboriginality in the future, and how the work you're doing right now is manifesting into a stronger cultural present, and what is it going to look like in 10 years?
Yeah, I think there's probably actually in the work that we do, there's been major steps. So if I go back 25 years when we first delivered these sort of work, we were talking about cultural awareness. And it was great giving some facts and knowledge and a little bit around those kind of things. And over the last 15 years or so, it's become cultural competency. So it's great, we've got facts and knowledge, but how do we use it? So we've moved into that realm in that way. And then what we're seeing more and more, probably over the last 5 years, it's getting stronger all the time. And a lot of people in this room, I'm sure, would actually know it from that point of view, is cultural safety. And cultural safety has become the main thing that people want to learn about, and how do we actually create safer environments for everyone, not just for Aboriginal people, but all of our diversity. And in the 17 years I was in government, I actually was the state coordinator of the Aboriginal Sport and Recreation Program, delivering sports into Aboriginal communities. But at one point, I was actually working on an inclusion training package for the sports industry that was actually around people typically underrepresented in sport, so multicultural, women in sport, people with a disability, culturally and linguistically diverse communities, and Aboriginal people. And one of the things we pushed was that all the sports, and probably most businesses, most companies, most organisations, would put their hand up and say, "Hey, we're diverse. We're also very accessible. Anyone's welcome to come through those doors and work with us. Or anyone's welcome to come through those doors and access one of our programs or whatever it might be." So there's been this sort of, shift in that sense where we're actually trying to be more inclusive. We're using words like diversity all the time now. But the one thing I've always pushed that actually gets missed in those concepts is the term equity. And it's actually, once that person is through your doors, what is the experience you give them? Do they feel equal in that environment? Do they feel valued? And if people don't feel equal or valued, they walk straight back out. And it doesn't matter how inclusive or accessible you say you are, you end up with a revolving door. And so from an Aboriginal perspective, it might be in the sort of phrase of saying, you've got a reconciliation action plan. As part of your plan, we want to employ 5 Aboriginal people by the end of May. You'll find 5 Aboriginal people that want a job, that you can go tick, 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 and you've got those 5 people. What we'll say to those organisations, though, is what is the experience you then give them? Are they still employed in 6 months' time? Are they still employed in 12 months' time? Do they feel valued and equal within that environment or within that workplace or whatever it might be? So I think, moving forward, it gets to a point where all of our diversity, regardless of background, regardless of culture, religion, whatever it might be, you can be celebrated as the person that you are and therefore accepted as the person that you are, regardless of difference. Does that make sense? And so that's where, hopefully in a perfect world, we celebrate everybody and everyone has a say and everyone feels equal from that point of view. I'm 1 minute over. Oh. All good? Can't see any hands. apart from those that are ready to clap. So that's all right.
I know. I mean, in listening to your conversation around that place of understanding and self, I was sitting there at the front and just desperately needing to pick up the pieces and put them back together. But thank you so much, Rob, for grounding the conversation that we have been having over the last day and a half in a really concrete and practical appreciation of how the Koorie Heritage Trust is leading in this area. We are very excited. There'll be a little bit of movement and exciting action happening because this next session is a performative keynote from Caroline Bowditch, who is Executive Director of Arts Access Australia. You have been introduced to Caroline in a couple of iterations before now, but this is an entirely different one. We are lucky enough to experience some work here from the show Falling in Love with Frida, which was premiered by Caroline in 2014. It features both disabled and non-disabled performers, and sign language interpretation is embedded at its centre. This work is award-winning and critically acclaimed. It's a dance theatre work that has been shown 93 times to sold-out audiences across the UK and internationally. In this keynote presentation, Caroline will address why it was important to make this show, how it was represented in the Australian media as compared to overseas, and why it's important to reclaim Frida Kahlo as a disabled artist, and what it means to make work that doesn't focus on accepted mainstream conventions. As Caroline mentioned yesterday, she has some 16 years of experience living and working in the UK, and raised some really pertinent differences between those two contexts and how work with this focus is received and engaged with by audiences and organisations alike. I hope that I am significantly padding out the time while we reset the stage, but please give me directions, Caroline, if I need to move things.
You're all good.
This one stays here?
Yep. Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
Caroline, let me just reiterate. I believe we're going to run this straight with no questions, or if we have a tiny little bit of time at the end, we'll be able to make time for questions. All right, great work. If we could please make welcome to the stage, Caroline Bowditch.
Dear you, I know you so well. I know the foods you like to eat. I know the clothes that hang inside your wardrobe. I know where you sleep, the music you lay down to. I've sat at your table and in your garden, and I've seen the statues you've collected. I know that you never wear underwear, but that you cover your body in a very particular way. Homesick, you dance at the parties. I know you love to smoke unfiltered cigarettes, even though they turn your teeth black. The perfume you wore, I know your politics, and every day I learn more about mine. I know you had imaginary friends that lived in your incredible imagination. So much, but I want more. My name is Caroline, and for about 5 years now, I have been falling in love with Frida. Frida Kahlo, the Mexican painter. Now, I know that that's not unique, and thousands have done it before me, and thousands more will do it after me. And yes, I also know she's dead, which you wouldn't think would make for a very fulfilling relationship, but I like to think of it as just another case of unrequited love, of which there's been quite a bit of in my life. And I have become obsessed. I want to know every intimate detail, but not like we've all read it in books or seen it in the movie. I want to know it like she's telling me herself while we stare lovingly at each other across a pillow or wrapped around each other in a warm bath. I want to cover my body in gold in celebration of her life and wear dangly, heavy earrings that weigh down my earlobes and colourful, voluminous clothes. Actually, I want to be Mexican. Perhaps that's a little bit extreme, but what I do want to know is more about where I come from and what the land has to teach me. Frida makes me want to be braver, more politically savvy, more engaged with the world. I don't want to be Frida Kahlo, but I do want to bask in her glory as one of the finest women that has ever lived. Dear you, I know you so well, but I still want more. Night owl, golden, we hear you before we see you, telling us you were born years later than you were. The earth or the house? You are the hostess. Tequila! Okay, so the sad bit for all of you is that at this point in the show, we would really serve tequila or a non-alcoholic alternative. And we would cheers to Frida. There was something very important about doing that. For all of us to come together as an audience to celebrate the life of a disabled artist that so many people didn't know had a disability. Frida is iconic. She is known throughout the world. Her paintings sell for vast amounts of money, and Madonna is the greatest collector of them. Who knew? But lots of people don't associate disability with her, including me. I remember going to a retrospective of her work that was at the National Gallery of Australia in 2000, and I remember wandering through those massive galleries looking at her work, which disability is implicit in almost every one of them, but I never ever knew that she was a disabled artist. The saddest thing for me when I realised that was because everything that had been coming at me in the world had said, if you've got a disability, you don't really amount to much. So I couldn't even conceive that a disabled artist would be being held on such an incredible international stage. How have things changed? Maybe they have, maybe they haven't. Frida, we only ever performed Frida for 100 people because I didn't want it to be a show where people could come and be passive. The audience was always lit, and they were never far away from me. The stage was never big, and I made eye contact with every one of those audience members because I wanted them to see me, and I wanted them to be seen. Because of what I've realised is that by offering art that does this, people realise how often they're not seen in the world, or they're not seen in the way that they want to be seen in the world. When I started to think about making Frida, I was being an artist in residence for Dance 4 in Nottingham, and I had a 2-week period. I had studio space with no expectation of an outcome at all. As an artist, I'd never made work that didn't, or been in a studio without a pressure of, you need to deliver something. So to have all of that freedom was brilliant and also incredibly restrictive. So I spent the first 3 days kind of wandering around the room, singing some songs that were irrelevant, staring out the window, contemplating my navel. And after 3 days, I just went, "Come on, Bowditch, do something." What do you know best, was the question I asked myself. What do you know best? And I thought, I know my bones. I know the stories that live within them. So I started to think more about bones. I started to think about crustaceans and exoskeletal bones. I started to think about the ceremonial kind of paintings that happen of skeletons in Indigenous ceremonies. I started to think about sugar kind of skulls from the Day of the Dead, and before I knew it, there was Frida. She'd appeared. In the research, we realised that Frida probably had 7 deadly sins. She was a woman, she was Mexican, she was bisexual, she had a disability. There were all of these things that started to kind of open up, and I wanted to kind of take every one of them, not as a deadly sin, but as a beginning point to expose things. And the more research I did, the more similarities I realised that I had with Frida. I spent time making Frida. It took me 18 months to make Frida, from going to visit her house in Mexico, which I had the pleasure and honour of doing, through to actually getting to premiere. We previewed the show 6 times, and in each time we asked the audience a series of questions that I continued to ask the audience every time we performed it. We always did a post-show discussion, and I always asked the audience, what are the words that are resonating? And I would ask these words of you. What are the words that are resonating for you at the moment? What are the words that you would use to describe what you've just seen, what you've heard, what you've smelt, what you've tasted, what you're feeling? I also asked people what made them come. What made them buy a ticket and decide to come to the show? And about 50% of every audience said, I love Frida Kahlo. I made a very strategic decision choosing to work with an icon, because we all know that disability, as much as we want it to be, is not the sexy thing that attracts an audience, despite the fact that we're quite intrigued by the stories of disabled people. We very rarely actually see them on stage. So by choosing an icon that was known, what I did was brought 10,000 people to me that had no idea who I was. But now they do. And now they follow my work. And now they talk about the work to other people. It was strategic. It was on purpose. But it also came from a place of love. We worked with a BSL interpreter. I've got lovely Michelle today. But I worked with a BSL interpreter in the making of Frida. And that was absolutely crucial. I'd never done that before. I'd never embedded an interpreter into the work that I'd made. But I promised, and I have promised, and I will continue to promise, that I will never ever make work again that doesn't have in sign language interpretation and audio description at its heart. Because it's important, and I was in receipt of public funding. Surely it's a responsibility that we all have when we're in receipt of public funding to make it accessible to the entire population, not just a section of it. One of my aims at Arts Access Victoria is to work alongside artists that have an interest but feel they don't have the knowledge to make work inclusive. To make it inclusive. People often say, I really want to do it, but I don't know how. Well, We will show you how. And we will connect you to people that will be possibly the best artists that you've ever come in contact with. Because they bring a different perspective. They bring a whole new world that is the future. We have to shift this way. We know that 20% of the population currently has a disability, but we seem to not think about that. 20%. That's not a minority. That is a lot of people. Can we just put that in perspective? So 50% of the population are women, 20% of the population have a disability. We know that there is a vast majority of people in this country who aren't born in Australia. Let's be thinking about whose voices are we hearing. We know that our Indigenous population is crucial to all of this as well. Let's just get a reality check. I want to leave you with one thing. I started making a show about Frida Kahlo, but it ended up, this show was about love. And it was about life, and it was about having an awareness of the legacy that we're leaving behind in the world. Having an awareness of what we leave in our trace. In the making of Frida, I received an email from a woman that had met me when I was 4. She was a receptionist in a radiography place where I used to go and have x-rays taken as a tiny weeny child. I had no idea of the impact that I had made on her. 40 years later, she sent me an email to say, I heard your name on the radio and I remembered you. We don't know what we leave in the world, or we seem to have a very little knowledge of the impact that we are leaving. I would encourage you to think about what's your legacy. What are you leaving in the world? Be aware of it. I want to just show you or read you the end of the show. I've shown you the beginning. I've missed out all the fun bits where I talk about sex and, yeah. That's for another time. So, falling in love with Frida is about love and passion and falling in love, mostly with the wrong person or sometimes the right person, just not at the right time. And hopefully, eventually, as is now, the right person at the right time. It's about life and fragility. It's about the stories that are in my bones and of my bones. It's the thesis written in my DNA. It's about making a mark, having an awareness of what I'm leaving behind, a legacy of me. It's a portrait of sorts, a reflection of my life, a painting of my reality, acknowledging the internal and external interactions of daily life. Oh, and I found out that I grew up on the land of the Yorta Yorta people, and I've been wearing more pink. It's about life and love, but essentially, it's about me. So I have a tiny parting gift for you, which is actually physical. At the end of every show, we handed all of the audience members a postcard. On one side it says falling in love with Frida, and the other side it says falling in love with you. Part of making Falling in Love with Frida, I got the performers and various other people to write letters to their body, to write love letters to their bodies, to write about the things that we're not often encouraged to write about being honest with ourselves. One of the other really important things in this show was that I had started to realise that I was making work that was palatable to a mainstream audience. This show That wasn't my intention with this show at all. I made the work that I wanted to make, that said the things that I wanted to say. And I've just come back from Perth International Festival, where I remounted a show that I made called The Nature of Why with the British Para Orchestra, where we have 10 disabled and non-disabled musicians, orchestral musicians on stage, a string ensemble of 11, and 4 dancers, and 150 audience. There are no seats. There is no hierarchy. There is no fourth wall. We are all in it together. Every show has audio description. Every show has sign language interpretation. Every show is captioned. The effect of a show like that is profound. I look forward to making that work here, in Australia, in Victoria, in Melbourne, with as many of you that want to make it with me. I invite you. I invite you. But I invite you also to take a postcard and write a love letter to someone or something. And it might be even a love letter to yourself. Because you're important, and it's important. Thanks very much. I'm happy to have questions. Questions, reflections, words, whatever it is. We've got 7 minutes. A whole 7 minutes. And please introduce yourself. There's one stripy.
We should say this at the same time. My name's Margaret, and I'm
Nilmini.
And we're co-curating a show called Love Letters to Feminism. If we credit you, Caroline, can we please borrow your idea for our
performance?
Yes. Would that be okay?
Maybe let's have a conversation about what that is. I'm not sure which bit of it you want, but yeah. Actually, it was my brilliant designer that came up with that, not me. I won't take that credit. So you could credit her.
When we usually do the show, we give out little bottles of feminist quotes that will save your life. You know, little messages in a bottle. So it'd be lovely to use a postcard this time.
Brilliant. The other thing that happened is that, I don't know if anyone found it, but on the floor there was a tiny origami heart. Inside the origami, we used to fold them in the show. There were 3. Yeah, there it is. So we used to fold the origami hearts in the show, and inside was a quote from Frida that said, I used to think that I was the only person in the world that was this weird. But then I thought, there are a lot of people in the world. There must be someone else that's like this. If you're out there and you find me or find this, know that you're not alone and that you are brilliant. Or that was very not what it said, but it's kind of along those things about you're not alone in this and you're not weird, you're brilliant as you are. And we used to give it to 3 audience members that they would take it away and put it in their wallet for when they needed a little Frida reminder. There was another question. Yes. Wait for the microphone so that everyone can hear you, please. Thank you.
Testing. Hey, my name's John Casab, filmmaker. Got a question, forgive my ignorance, but how does closed captioning work in improv theatre? Is there technology available for that kind of thing?
I'm sure there's someone else more wise on that in the room, but this kind of event is being live captioned, so it absolutely is possible. Will and Michaela are also in the room, could talk to you about live audio description. Yeah, it's all possible. It's just about where you put it. Oh, I forgot. I had a whole PowerPoint presentation that you're waiting to see of some photos. I'll just put them on, and then there's a little tiny 3-minute thing. Am I going there? Yeah, there we go. So this is me with no clothes on. I'm not going to talk them through, but this was a promotional image that we used. Doesn't scream disability, but the text very clearly said that I am a disabled performer, proudly. Other questions while this just rolls through? Hang on, Jess.
My name's Jess. I'm a queer disabled writer and a citizen journalist at this event. I was very moved by that performance, so thank you so much. But I was just wondering, after the last panel, where words like "not a priority" were used, I was wondering if you wanted, as a disabled leader within the arts, to say anything or respond. What was your sense after watching that panel?
Thanks. It's been really interesting for me coming back into the Australian context, because I've lived in a country where equality is a priority and has been a priority in the arts scene for the last at least 10 years. And when I say it's a priority, we're talking about serious investment and lack of investment in anyone who's not willing to play the game. So I forgot to mention investment. So Falling in Love with Frida had about 150, the equivalent. This is a tiny promo film. Sorry for the flicking at the beginning. I'll keep answering it. So Frida cost 150 grand to produce, which is kind of unheard of in this country for work made by disabled artists, probably anyone who's on the fringes. One show. That's one show. That's not the whole of me for a year. That's one show. I think we need to absolutely up the significant investment in the work of disabled artists and those of us that are on the margins, anyone that gets excluded. I was really, really pleased to hear Jane talk about the importance of measuring. We need to work out who the fuck is doing everything and who's not. And that's the only way we're going to shift any of this, is until we know what numbers we're playing with, it'll stay as it is. And until, actually, in the UK now, people don't get funded unless they've got an equality agenda and unless that's actually genuine. I feel like there's a lot of great intentions and not a lot of action. And more, as I get more and more confident, I'm going to start calling that out. Yeah. We need to stop talking and do it. 2 questions.
Hi, my name's Kamal Hussain, and I'm a British-based Iraqi theatre maker.
Yeah.
I'm not entirely sure that I agree with you about the way that things are funded in terms of diversity in the UK, because it's an experience that I've had as well, but maybe that's a conversation we can have outside of this forum.
Yeah.
I'm very interested in your view from a UK perspective and how you're going to translate that as you come home.
Yeah.
I think what you described as being given space to create something without an end product is actually pretty unique in the UK.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen very often at all.
Yeah.
And certainly not my experience of that case. And often, it's the same voices that we hear from the same diverse groups, because the gatekeepers in the UK believe that they can't find those other artists.
Yep.
But that's mostly because they're so completely disenfranchised that they're not going to those organisations.
Yeah.
How did you manage to become one of those voices, I guess is my question, within the UK setting?
I lived in Scotland.
Creative Scotland rather than ACE, yeah.
Yeah. So I was in Scotland, which was a bit like living in a bubble, a very protective bubble where that it was a priority, equality was a priority, but we had relationships with the funding body, and they were personal relationships, and people knew who we were because the community was potentially smaller, but we were also incredibly connected to each other. I was lucky enough to live in Glasgow, and even though most of us were all going into the same pot of money, we didn't have this kind of fractious competitive thing, but we were really supportive of each other because we knew that whoever got it would bring other people into that pot. So there was a real generosity. So I think I completely hear you about I was very lucky, and I think the other interesting thing just to note is that in Scotland we didn't have a disability arts organisation like Arts Access Victoria. So as disabled artists, we kind of had to fend for ourselves. And so what that ended up producing was incredibly strong, feisty disabled artists that are now kind of touring internationally. And Scotland really saw us as an export market in a way that I haven't experienced that in Australia other than with companies like Back to Back Theatre, who are not disability-led. They're producing great work, but in terms of kind of calling it as it is, it's not disability-led, even though it's working very closely with disabled performers. And I think there's a conversation to be had there. So I lived in the Scottish bubble, which was very kind to me. There's another program that we could talk about, which is called Unlimited, and that also, this idea about specific ring-fenced funding for the target market that you're after is the crucial way to change. Crucial way to change.
That's happening, I think, with disability, but not necessarily the
Yeah. Interesting. Thanks for your question. I'm really conscious of time, that I've run 3 minutes over. Thank you all for your attention. I'm happy to chat.
Thank you, Caroline, for your time and insight, and also I think the challenges and nuances that audience members and questions are bringing up today I find incredibly valuable, because I think they're some of the same kind of granular and distinguished. I want us to see distinguishing some specificity in the conversations that we're having here, because if we keep it at a very generic level, I think there's lots of nice agreement that we want to see the world get better, but not a lot of specificity about how that actually happens. And so it's really great to see that kind of being articulated in some of the questions. We are going to break now for an hour for lunchtime. As with yesterday, we have a range of lunches that are up on this floor for those who have had specific dietary requirements or have access requests. There are meals available on the 3rd and 4th floor if people would like to just even find a quiet breakout space or to connect with colleagues. There are also meals downstairs in the moat, which the ushers can assist with directions to all 3 of those locations, plus the ones that are in here. And we are going to reconvene at 1:15. If I may make a small request or question. I had some conversation and feedback from people who had participated in the confidential debriefs yesterday, that they had indicated that there were some things that they would like to add to the conversation in a non-confidential way. So I just wanted to say that I'll make myself available at lunchtime and try and stay around here or the moat area if people would like to come and speak with myself or any other member of the Diversity Arts team about how we might include that and incorporate that discussion. Thank you very much. Once again, Caroline Bowditch.